Good evening, my friends. Today I am going to say that you don't see the world as it is. You see the world as you are. Think about that for a moment. The way you interpret life, the way you make decisions, the way you respond to challenges. It's all filtered through the lens you carry in your mind. We call that lens a paradigm. And here's the truth. If you can change that lens, you can change your life. This is not philosophy, it's power. Today, I want to help you experience the life-changing force of a paradigm shift. As most people walk through life unaware of the invisible lens through which they view everything. That lens, your paradigm, filters every experience, every conversation, every decision. And here's the problem: if you can't see the lens, you can't change it. You end up living on autopilot, repeating patterns, reacting the same way, thinking the same thoughts, and wondering why your results never change. It's like wearing glasses that distort your vision and not even realizing it. You start thinking, this is just how the world is, when in reality, it's just how you're seeing it. Let me tell you a story that perfectly illustrates this. A man once told me about a subway ride in New York City early on a Sunday morning. It was quiet. Passengers were reading newspapers, sipping coffee, lost in thought. Then at one stop, a man walked in with his 3 children. The kids were loud, unruly, bouncing off the walls, knocking into people, grabbing newspapers from strangers. The father just sat there, eyes half closed, doing nothing. After a few minutes, the man I'm talking to had had enough. He turned to the father and said, "Sir, your children are really disturbing a lot of people. Could you please control them?" The father looked up, almost as if waking from a dream, and said softly, "Oh, I suppose I should. We just came from the hospital. Their mother died about an hour ago. I guess they don't know how to handle it, and honestly, neither do I." In that moment, everything changed for the man telling me this story. The irritation, the frustration, the judgment, they vanished instantly. They were replaced by compassion, by empathy, by a desire to help. But here's the powerful thing: the kids hadn't changed. Their behavior was exactly the same. What changed was the paradigm. The lens shifted. And when the lens shifts, everything else looks different. That's the first step to mastering the power of paradigm shifts awareness. You can't change what you can't see. And most of the time, we're not even aware of how our paradigms are running the show. We assume our point of view is the truth, but it's only our perspective. This is why 2 people can live through the exact same event and have completely different experiences. It's not the event that defines them. It's the paradigm they bring to it. Think about your own life. How many times have you misunderstood someone's intentions because you didn't have the full picture? How often have you told yourself a story about why someone acted the way they did, only to find out later you were completely wrong? The human mind is a meaning-making machine. When there are gaps in the story, we fill them in with our own assumptions. And then we treat those assumptions as facts. The danger is that our assumptions often come from old paradigms, beliefs shaped by past experiences, upbringing, fears, and even other people's opinions. So the question becomes, how do you become aware of your paradigms before they control you? It starts with a pause. That's right, a simple pause. When you feel yourself reacting, whether it's anger, defensiveness, judgment, or frustration, pause. Ask yourself, could there be something here I'm not seeing? Could there be another explanation? That tiny gap between stimulus and response is where awareness lies. And in that space, you can choose to look at the situation differently. I'll be honest, awareness isn't always comfortable. Sometimes you realize that your paradigm is built on a misunderstanding, a prejudice, or a fear you didn't want to admit you had. Sometimes it forces you to confront the fact that you've been looking at someone, or yourself, in a way that's not fair or not helpful. But here's the truth. You cannot grow without discomfort. And you cannot shift a paradigm without first recognizing the one you're living in. Let's get practical. I want you to think of one situation in your life right now that's causing you stress, frustration, or conflict. It could be at work, at home, in your friendships, anywhere. Got it. Now ask yourself, what story am I telling myself about this situation? And what would change if that story wasn't true? That's the kind of question that invites a paradigm shift. Because often, the real problem isn't the situation. It's the lens you're looking through. Imagine if you applied this to every area of your life. Imagine if, instead of assuming you already knew what someone meant, you asked them to clarify. Instead of assuming the worst, you considered the best. Instead of reacting instantly, you gave yourself space to understand. You'd make better decisions. You'd strengthen relationships. You'd experience less stress and more peace. And it all starts with awareness. So here's my challenge to you for the next 7 days. Practice catching yourself in the act of reacting. The moment you feel that rush of emotion, pause. Ask yourself, what's the paradigm I'm seeing this through? And is there another way to look at it? You will be amazed at how much changes when you simply become aware of the lens you're using. Because remember, once you can see the lens, you can choose to change it. And when you change the way you see the world, you'll be amazed at how the world changes before your eyes. The lens you're wearing right now, the way you interpret everything, has been shaped over years, maybe decades. Your upbringing, your culture, your education, your past successes, your failures, even the voices of people who spoke into your life, they've all contributed to the paradigm you carry. And here's the danger. Most of us never stop to ask if that paradigm is accurate, if it's serving us, or if it's even ours to begin with. We inherit beliefs from our families, our communities, our industries, and then we live inside those beliefs without ever questioning them. It's like being handed a pair of glasses when you were 5 years old and still wearing them as an adult, never realizing your prescription needs to change. I once worked with a young man who believed his boss didn't like him. He carried that assumption for months. Every time the boss walked by without smiling, it reinforced the belief. Every time his ideas weren't implemented, it confirmed the suspicion. He started disengaging, avoiding extra projects, doing the bare minimum, keeping his head down. Finally, I encouraged him to simply ask his boss what he could do to improve. To his surprise, the boss lit up and said, "I've actually been hoping to mentor you. You've got great potential, but I need to see you take more initiative." The paradigm shifted in a single conversation. The boss hadn't been cold. He'd been waiting for the young man to step forward. From that moment, the relationship changed, and so did his career. The lesson is simple. When you dare to challenge your lens, you open the door to new possibilities. But that takes humility. It means admitting that the way you see things might not be the way they are. And that's not easy, because our paradigms often feel like reality. We don't think, "This is my interpretation." We think, "This is the truth." That's why challenging your lens is an act of courage. It forces you to consider that you might be wrong. Here's the thing, your brain loves certainty. It would rather be confidently wrong than uncertain. That's why we cling to our paradigms, even when they're limiting us. We'd rather stay in the comfort of a familiar frame than step into the discomfort of the unknown. But if you never question your lens, you'll never outgrow it. And if you don't outgrow it, you'll keep hitting the same walls over and over again, wondering why nothing changes. Let's bring this closer to home. Think about a time you misread someone's words or actions. Maybe you thought a friend was ignoring you because they didn't care, but later found out they were going through a crisis. Maybe you assumed you weren't qualified for an opportunity, but later realized the only person who thought that was you. In each of those moments, the paradigm you carried shaped your behavior, and your behavior shaped your results. Change the paradigm, and you change the outcome. So how do you actually challenge your lens in a practical way? Start by catching your automatic thoughts. The next time you hear yourself saying, "Hey, always, she never, that's just the way it is," or "I could never," Stop. Those phrases are red flags that you're operating from a fixed paradigm. Ask yourself, what evidence do I have? Is there another way to look at this? What might I be missing? This isn't about doubting everything. It's about opening yourself to the possibility that your current view might be incomplete. You can also challenge your lens by seeking other perspectives. Talk to people who see the situation differently. Read books that offer opposing viewpoints. Put yourself in environments that disrupt your comfort zone. When you expose yourself to new ideas, you start to realize that your current paradigm is just one of many ways to see the world. That awareness alone can crack open the door to transformation. Let me warn you, when you start doing this, it can feel unsettling. If you've built your identity around certain beliefs, questioning those beliefs can feel like questioning yourself. But this discomfort is the birthplace of growth. The people who make the biggest leaps in life aren't necessarily the smartest or the luckiest. They're the ones willing to challenge their own thinking. They don't just ask, what do I see? They ask, why do I see it that way? And in asking that question, they discover new opportunities they would have otherwise missed. Here's the emotional reality. Sometimes the only thing standing between you and the life you want is the story you're telling yourself. The job you think you can't get. The relationship you believe is beyond repair. The skill you assume you're too old to learn. These aren't walls, they're painted lines on the floor. And the moment you challenge your lens, you realize you can step right over them. So here's my challenge for you this week. Choose one belief you've carried for a long time. Something about yourself, your work, your relationships, or the world. Write it down. Then ask yourself, what if the opposite were true? Don't argue with it. Just imagine it. Imagine living as if the opposite were real. What would you do differently? How would you act? Who would you become? That simple exercise can be the spark that ignites a paradigm shift. Because in the end, the lens you're wearing isn't the truth. It's just your truth. And the moment you choose to question it, you open the door to a bigger, better, more empowering way of seeing. And once you see differently, you can't go back. The world changes because you have. One of the most transformative paradigm shifts you can make is to start seeing people as people, not as obstacles or problems to be managed. Too often, we slip into a mindset where the people around us are just roles, labels, or barriers to our goals. The colleague who disagrees with you becomes difficult. The teenager who challenges your rules becomes rebellious. The driver who cuts you off becomes an idiot. When you see others this way, you stop connecting with them as human beings. You stop being curious about their story. You stop caring about their struggles. And when that happens, the relationship suffers, trust erodes, and communication breaks down. I remember working with a manager who was frustrated with one of his team members. This employee was missing deadlines, coming in late, and seemed disengaged in meetings. The manager was ready to fire him, convinced that he was lazy and uncommitted. Then, almost by accident, the manager learned that the employee was caring for a parent who was in the final stages of a serious illness. Suddenly, the frustration melted away. The manager saw not a problem to be fixed but a person in pain. They sat down together and created a flexible work plan that allowed the employee to manage both his family responsibilities and his job. Performance improved almost immediately. But more importantly, the relationship changed. The manager's trust and empathy built a loyalty that lasted years. What changed? The circumstances hadn't shifted much, but the manager's paradigm had. When you see people as obstacles, you put yourself in opposition to them. You focus on how they're in your way, how they inconvenience you, or how they frustrate you. Your energy goes into resisting them instead of understanding them. But when you see them as people, you start asking different questions. What are they going through? What pressures are they under? What matters to them? This curiosity creates space for empathy, and empathy transforms interactions. You begin to realize that most people's behavior makes sense in the context of their experiences, even if it doesn't make sense in the context of your assumptions. This doesn't mean excusing bad behavior or avoiding accountability. It means addressing issues from a place of respect and understanding rather than judgment and hostility. You can hold someone to a high standard and still treat them with dignity. In fact, people are far more likely to rise to a standard when they know they're being seen as a whole person, not just a problem. Think about your own life. There are probably people right now you've mentally labeled in ways that make it hard to connect with them. Maybe it's the boss who never seems satisfied, the neighbor who complains too much, the sibling who never calls, or the friend who's always late. The moment you slap a label on someone, you stop seeing the full picture. You reduce them to a single trait, and in doing so, you miss opportunities for deeper connection. But when you consciously choose to replace the label with curiosity, you often discover something that changes your entire perspective. A simple but powerful way to make this shift is to practice assuming positive intent. When someone's behavior frustrates you, instead of immediately attributing it to selfishness, incompetence, or malice, ask yourself, what's the most generous explanation for this behavior? Maybe they're overwhelmed, distracted, or dealing with something you can't see. Even if your generous explanation turns out to be wrong, starting from that place changes the way you interact. Your tone softens. Your questions become more open. You create space for honesty instead of defensiveness. This shift also applies to how you see yourself. When you view yourself as an obstacle to your own success, when you label yourself lazy, undisciplined, or unworthy, you close the door on growth. But when you see yourself as a person who's learning, struggling, and evolving, you create space for self-compassion. And self-compassion fuels resilience. You're more likely to get back up after setbacks when you see yourself as a human being worthy of patience and grace. The emotional payoff of this paradigm shift is enormous. Relationships deepen. Conflicts resolve faster. Trust builds. You start experiencing more cooperation, less resistance, and the people around you feel seen, valued, and respected, which makes them more willing to see value and respect you in return. So here's my challenge to you. Choose one relationship in your life where you've been seeing the other person as a problem. For the next week, make a conscious effort to see them as a person. Ask them about their life. Look for their strengths. Imagine what pressures they might be under. Even if nothing changes in their behavior, you'll notice a change in yourself, and that change will affect how they respond to you. When you see people as people, you start to remember that we're all carrying invisible battles. And in that awareness, you not only shift your paradigm, you also shift the energy of every relationship you touch. The greatest leaders, the most impactful friends, the most inspiring parents, partners, and colleagues all have one thing in common. They look beyond the label and see the person. And when you make that choice, you'll find that what once felt like an obstacle might actually become an ally. A paradigm shift becomes truly powerful when it aligns with timeless principles. You can change the way you see things, but if that new lens is built on faulty values, like selfishness, dishonesty, or short-term gain, you may find temporary success but long-term regret. Principles are those unchanging truths that hold up no matter the situation. Things like honesty, respect, responsibility, service, and integrity. They're not trends. They're not negotiable based on convenience. They're the foundation of lasting success and personal credibility. When your paradigm is anchored to principles, you don't just react to circumstances. You navigate them with a compass that always points true north. I once worked with a company that was obsessed with quarterly profits. Everything was about hitting numbers, often at the expense of customers and employees. Salespeople were encouraged to push products clients didn't need just to meet targets. It worked for a while. The numbers looked great on paper. But over time, customers stopped trusting the company. Employee turnover skyrocketed. The short-term wins were destroying long-term viability. Then the leadership team made a radical shift. They adopted a new guiding principle. We exist to serve our customers in ways that genuinely improve their lives. Every decision was measured against that standard. They redesigned their sales process, trained staff to listen more than pitch, and built incentives around customer satisfaction, not just sales volume. Within 2 years, not only did profits recover, but the company's reputation and employee engagement reached new heights. The paradigm shifted, and because it was rooted in a principle, it had staying power. When your paradigm aligns with principles, it acts like an internal filter. It shapes your choices even when no one is watching. It gives you the courage to say no to opportunities that look good on the surface, but would compromise your values. It helps you keep your integrity when pressure mounts, and it guides you when the path forward isn't clear. Without principles, it's easy to get lost chasing trends, reacting to emotions, or following the crowd. But principles provide stability in a constantly changing world. Think about your own life. Have you ever made a decision that looked smart in the moment, but left you feeling uneasy later? That unease often comes from acting in a way that conflicts with your core principles. Maybe you said yes to something because it was easier than saying no, even though it didn't feel right. Maybe you cut a corner thinking no one would notice, but you noticed. And that was enough to erode your self-respect. The power of aligning your paradigm with principles is that it protects you from those regrets. You live in a way that you can stand behind, regardless of the outcome. It's also important to remember that principles are universal. They apply to everyone. If honesty is right for you, it's right for your competitors, your employees, your friends, and even strangers. If respect is right for you, it's right for the person who agrees with you and the one who doesn't. When you apply principles selectively, they become preferences, not principles. And preferences change under pressure. True principles don't. This alignment also builds trust, and trust is the currency of all relationships. Personal, professional, and societal. People trust those whose actions are consistent with their words and values. They know where you stand. They know you won't change your tune just because it's convenient. That kind of predictability is rare, and it's magnetic. People want to work with, buy from, and follow those they trust. The challenge is that aligning your paradigm with principles often requires short-term sacrifice. It might mean turning down a profitable deal because it violates your standards. It might mean having a difficult conversation instead of avoiding conflict. It might mean owning up to a mistake rather than covering it up. These choices aren't always easy, but they're always worth it. Because every time you act according to principle, you strengthen your character. And character is what sustains you when circumstances turn against you. So here's a practical way to start. Pick one principle you value deeply, maybe integrity, service, or respect, and use it as your decision-making filter for the next week. Before you act, ask yourself, does this choice align with that principle? If the answer is no, have the courage to adjust. If the answer is yes, move forward confidently, knowing you're building a life you can be proud of. In the end, a paradigm shift isn't just about seeing the world differently. It's about seeing it more accurately, through the lens of what's right and true. Principles are that lens. They keep you steady in the storms, humble in success, and grounded when life tries to pull you in 100 different directions. When your paradigm aligns with principles, you don't just change your perspective. You change your legacy. You stop chasing what's popular and start pursuing what's permanent. And in a world that's constantly changing, that's the kind of shift that will not only transform your life, but inspire others to transform theirs. One of the most liberating paradigm shifts you can experience is moving from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset. Scarcity thinking is built on the belief that there's only so much to go around, so if someone else wins, you must lose. It's the idea that success, opportunities, love, recognition, or resources are limited and that you have to fight, compete, or hoard to get your share. Abundance thinking is completely different. It's built on the belief that there's more than enough for everyone and that someone else's success doesn't diminish yours. It can actually enhance it. When you adopt an abundance paradigm, you stop operating from fear and start operating from possibility. I once knew two salespeople in the same company. One of them guarded his leads like they were gold. He refused to share information with his colleagues, always worried that if they closed a sale, it would mean fewer opportunities for him. The other salesperson had the opposite approach. He freely shared leads, tips, and strategies with anyone who asked. He even introduced clients to his teammates if he thought they'd be a better fit. The result? The sharer became one of the top performers in the company, not because he held on to everything, but because he created a network of goodwill. People wanted to work with him. Colleagues returned the favor. Management noticed his leadership. He didn't lose by helping others. He gained more than he could have imagined. The difference wasn't in their skill level. It was in their paradigm. Scarcity thinking creates a constant sense of competition, even in places where collaboration would serve you better. It makes you see other people's success as a threat rather than an inspiration. It can make you jealous, guarded, and unwilling to take risks. And here's the irony. Scarcity thinking often becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you operate out of fear that there's not enough, you close yourself off to opportunities, relationships, and ideas that could have expanded your resources. Abundance thinking does the opposite. It opens you up to collaboration. It allows you to celebrate others' wins because you believe there's space for yours too. It makes you more generous with your time, knowledge, and support because you understand that giving doesn't leave you with less. It multiplies what's possible. Abundance doesn't mean you ignore reality or pretend resources are unlimited. It means you approach challenges with creativity instead of fear, asking, how can we create more? Instead of, how can I protect what little I have? Think about how this plays out in relationships. Scarcity thinking in a relationship sounds like, if I give too much love, I might get taken advantage of, or if they get what they want, I'll have to go without. Abundance thinking says, the more love, respect, and generosity I give, the more it grows between us. The same principle applies in leadership. Scarcity-minded leaders keep their team members small so they won't outshine them. Abundance-minded leaders invest in their people because they know a stronger team creates a stronger leader. It's worth noting that abundance thinking isn't just a nice idea. It's practical. When you believe there's enough, you're more willing to share, and sharing builds trust. Trust leads to stronger networks, and stronger networks create more opportunities. Opportunities bring growth, and growth reinforces the belief in abundance. It becomes a cycle, just like scarcity does. But this one works in your favor. Shifting from scarcity to abundance starts with awareness. Catch yourself when you feel threatened by someone else's success, or when your first instinct is to protect what you have instead of sharing. Ask yourself, what would I do in this situation if I believed there was more than enough to go around? Sometimes the answer will challenge you. You might feel vulnerable, but vulnerability is part of growth, and the rewards of abundance thinking are worth it. You can also practice abundance in small, tangible ways. Compliment a colleague on their achievement without comparing yourself. Share a resource that could help someone else, even if it doesn't directly benefit you. Offer help without expecting something in return. Keep a gratitude journal to remind yourself of how much you already have. Gratitude is the soil where abundance thinking grows. The emotional payoff is huge. Scarcity keeps you tense, anxious, and always looking over your shoulder. Abundance brings peace, confidence, and joy because you know your worth isn't diminished by anyone else's gain. You become more resilient in the face of setbacks because you believe there are always more opportunities ahead. You stop playing defense and start playing offense, not against others, but with life itself. So here's the challenge for the next week. Whenever you catch yourself thinking in terms of either or, replace it with both can. Instead of either they succeed or I do, tell yourself, we can both succeed. Instead of I can either have a career or a family, ask, how can I create a life that allows both? This small mental shift can open doors you didn't even know were there. When you move from scarcity to abundance, you stop living in a world of limits and start living in a world of possibilities. You realize that helping someone else climb doesn't push you down. It lifts you higher too. And once you experience that truth, you'll never want to go back to the small, fearful world that scarcity thinking creates. Paradigm shifts aren't one-time events. They're not something you experience once and then you're done. Life will continue to present you with new situations, challenges, and opportunities that require you to see things differently. The danger is thinking that because you've had a breakthrough before, you'll automatically keep growing. The reality is, if you don't actively renew and update your paradigms, you can easily slip back into old patterns. The same mindset that brought you success yesterday might be the one that holds you back tomorrow. Growth requires constant adjustment. I knew a man who had built a thriving business over 20 years. His paradigm about success was clear: work hard, control the details, and never take unnecessary risks. For a long time, that approach served him well. But as technology changed and his industry evolved, his once reliable paradigm started to fail him. Competitors were innovating faster, customers were expecting more, and his company's growth began to stall. At first, he doubled down on the old approach: more control, more caution, but it only slowed him down further. It wasn't until he realized that his definition of success needed to shift from control everything to empower others and embrace change that his business began to thrive again. The same habits that had once made him a leader were now limiting him. By renewing his paradigm, he unlocked a new chapter of success. That's the nature of life. What works in one season might not work in the next. The skills, beliefs, and strategies that help you as a student may not serve you as a parent. The perspective that drives you early in your career might not fulfill you later in life. The way you see relationships when you're single might need to evolve when you're married. If you hold on to a paradigm too tightly, you risk becoming rigid in a world that demands flexibility. Constant paradigm renewal requires humility. It means admitting that you don't have all the answers, and that the answers you do have might need updating. It means being willing to ask, what am I not seeing? Even when things seem to be going well. It means staying curious and open instead of defensive when someone challenges your viewpoint. Humility isn't weakness. It's the foundation for growth because it keeps you teachable. Renewing your paradigm also requires intentional reflection. Life moves fast, and if you don't pause to evaluate your assumptions, you might not notice when they've stopped serving you. That's why it's powerful to set aside time regularly, once a month, once a quarter, to ask yourself, what's working? What's not? What beliefs am I holding on to that might be outdated? Where am I resisting change? This kind of self-audit can reveal blind spots and open the door to new ways of thinking before you hit a crisis. Another key to ongoing paradigm renewal is surrounding yourself with people who challenge and inspire you. If everyone around you thinks the same way you do, your paradigms will rarely be tested. Seek out conversations with people from different backgrounds, industries, and perspectives. Read books that stretch your thinking. Travel to places that disrupt your routines. Expose yourself to situations that force you to adapt. Every time you step into a new environment, you give yourself the chance to see through a different lens. The emotional reality is that change is uncomfortable, even when it's good for you. We're wired to prefer the familiar, even if it's no longer effective. That's why many people resist paradigm shifts until pain forces them to change. But the most successful and fulfilled people don't wait for pain. They choose growth before they're forced into it. They embrace the discomfort of renewal because they know it's the price of staying relevant resilient, and fully alive. There's also a deep sense of freedom in constant paradigm renewal. When you know that your current way of seeing things isn't permanent, you stop clinging so tightly to being right. You stop needing to defend your old beliefs at all costs. You give yourself permission to evolve, and that creates space for others to evolve too. It turns life into a journey of discovery rather than a fight to preserve the past. So here's a simple challenge to start with. Every month, pick one area of your life, your work, your health, your relationships, your personal goals, and ask yourself, if I were starting fresh today, knowing what I know now, what would I do differently? That question forces you to look beyond habit and comfort and into possibility. Then take one action based on the answer. Over time, those small course corrections will keep your paradigms fresh and your growth continuous. The truth is, your greatest breakthroughs won't come from holding on to what's worked. They'll come from being willing to let it go when it no longer serves you. Life will keep changing. The question is, will you change with it? When you commit to constant paradigm renewal, you ensure that your vision stays clear, your mind stays open, and your future stays full of possibility. And that's how you keep turning every new challenge into your next transformation. TAKSE Vir Way BY